The two pathetic 0-16 seasons in NFL history are forever etched in our memory. Dan Orlovsky unwittingly running out of the back of the end zone with the Lions in 2008, and Hugh Jackson washing off the sins of the 2017 Browns in the waters of Lake Erie. You can even go back to the 1960 Dallas Cowboys, who didn't win any of their 12 games, or the expansion Buccaneers, who went 0-14 in 1976, and prompted their head coach John McKay to tell his players, "Stop by my office tomorrow and pick up some fake noses and mustaches so no one recognizes your sorry asses." But there exists in the annals of NFL history a team whose winless campaign is often forgotten. A team that would never recover from its disastrous year. A tale so sad that the winless season wasn't even the worst part for both them and others. The story of the NFL's forgotten winless team is coming up right after this. My dudes, as the world is starting to open back up, you know what that means. Other things are gonna open up too. And studies show that a woman without a doubt prefers a man that takes care of his junk. That's where Manscaped comes in. With the Perfect Package 3.0, you get the utmost in male personal grooming. With the centerpiece being the Lawnmower 3.0 that features skin-safe technology, 90 minutes of battery life, and a super clutch LED light that goes with the other gear like Crop Preserver deodorant and Crop Reviver ball toner. Add the Peak Hygiene subscription for replacement blades sent right to your door at the frequency you desire. So after this video, head on over to manscaped.com/5-points and get 20% off instantly at checkout. Act now on the perfect package and we'll throw in the Shed travel bag and a pair of boxers and free shipping. Hit that link below and open up a whole new world of personal grooming. Manscaped.com. This is the story of the 1982 Baltimore Colts. A team so far removed from the days of Johnny Unitas and Raymond Berry that it made them look like ancient figures. Who remembers the greatest game ever played? The 1959 championship game in which the Colts beat the Giants in overtime. That might as well have been Greek mythology in 1982. To understand why the 82 Colts are not held up with their winless peers, it's necessary to comprehend the context of the season. There were not 16 games played in 1982. Thanks to a player strike that lasted 57 days in the middle of the season, teams only played 9 regular season games that year. For the Colts, it probably would have been better had the strike wiped out the whole season. This was a team that wasn't equipped to compete in 1982. At quarterback, their options were 2 rookies, Art Schlichter, the 4th overall pick of the draft, and Mike Pagel, a 4th-round pick from Arizona State, where he had played for the head coach of the 82 Colts, Frank Kush. Possible bad sign, Schlichter, the top 5 pick, was beaten out by the guy drafted 80 picks later. On offense, the cupboard was almost totally bare. Not a single skill position player on the unit ever made a Pro Bowl in their career. Not even close. Household names like fullback Randy McMillan, running back Curtis Dickey, and wide receiver Matt Buzza were there to strike fear in the hearts of the defense. That's sarcasm, by the way. The only impact player on offense was the center, Ray Donaldson, a 6-time Pro Bowler that eventually won a ring 13 years later with the Cowboys. Defensively, the situation was even worse. 4 starters were rookies, making the team total 8, and none of the names will even ring a bell. The only player of note was defensive end Cleveland Crosby, and that's because his full name is Cleveland Pittsburgh Crosby. Kind of a conflict and foreshadowing, no? The team was also under the rule of a rookie, the 53-year-old aforementioned head coach Frank Kush, who only lasted 3 seasons and compiled a record of 11-28-1. Kush had spent 22 seasons as the Arizona State head coach and 1 year leading the Hamilton Tiger Cats before moving to Baltimore, and honestly, knowing the roster he had in front of him, he should have stayed up north. Prior to the strike, the team played just 2 games, fairly competitive matches. Baltimore lost their opener 24-13 to the Patriots after blowing a second-half lead, and the next week dropped a close one to the eventual AFC champion Dolphins by just 4 points. Whatever momentum, goodwill, or moral victories they had secured in the first 2 weeks vanished during the strike. While the players picketed or went home, head coach Frank Kush proved himself an authoritarian in Baltimore. According to former Colts GM Ernie Accorsi, Cush had his assistant coaches applying fresh coats of paints to the facility or pick weeds out of the garden. Perhaps they should have been spending more time on the game plan. The Colts missed 7 games during the strike, 4 of which were to be played at home, meaning Baltimore ended up playing 5 of their 9 total games in a hostile stadium. Perhaps they only resumed for their opponents because, according to the scoreboard, the Colts themselves didn't even attend their next 2 games. First, a 37-0 loss at the New York Jets. Next week, a trip to Buffalo and still 0 points. In the 20-0 loss to the Bills, the Colts failed to cross the 50-yard line. Even if they kept losing, it couldn't always be that ugly, could it? After their back-to-back shutouts, the Colts dropped 2 games by a combined 6 points, a 20-17 loss to the defending AFC champion Bengals, and a 13-10 loss to the playoff-bound Vikings. Both times, the Colts led in the second half, and both times, they blew it.
You blew it! You had it on and you blew it! You blew it! You blew it!
You blew it.
In an attempt to grab victory from the jaws of defeat, the Colts stormed back from a 2-touchdown deficit in the fourth quarter to take the Packers to overtime, but in front of their home crowd, couldn't break the tie in the extra period. Well, they didn't lose, but still fell to 0-6-1 on the season. That was as close as they would get to sniffing a win in 1982. They lost their last 2 games to the Chargers and Dolphins by a combined 45 points, sending them to the golf course with an 0-8-1 record on the abbreviated 9-game season. The bad news is they had to deal with the shame of a winless season, even if it wasn't a 16-game slate. Given that 4 of their games had been within 1 score of a Colts win, it's fair to believe that they would have eventually clawed their way to a win had they been given 7 more chances. But the winless season wasn't the end of their problems. It was actually the beginning. Well, the good news was that because of their abysmal season, the Colts had the number 1 pick in a draft that featured one of the greatest quarterback prospects of all time, Stanford's John Elway. The bad news, Elway wanted nothing to do with the Colts and said he'd rather go play for the Yankees, who drafted him as an outfielder in the '81 MLB draft. Elway had been advised against becoming a Colt primarily due to the ineptitude of owner Robert Irsay and the my way or the highway nature of Frank Cush. Former Colts MVP quarterback Burt Jones told Elway's agent the organization was like a circus and that Jones had heard from a friend that Cush was like a slave master. Besides that being a cancel in the year 2020 and harsh, Elway heeded that advice. Baltimore, as stubborn as possible, rather than taking guys like Eric Dickerson, Jim Kelly, or Dan Marino, used their first pick on Elway and dangled him as trade bait to the highest bidder. That was the Broncos, who didn't have to give up much, as it would seem. Denver received John Elway in the trade, a transcendent Hall of Fame Super Bowl champ to play quarterback for 16 years. Baltimore did okay. They got Denver's first-round pick Chris Hinton, a guard who went on to become a 7-time Pro Bowler. A good get, but not John Elway. They also received quarterback Mark Herman, who threw 16 touchdowns in his career, plus Denver's first-round pick in '84, which turned out to be guard Ron Solt, a solid one-time Pro Bowler who spent 5 years with the team. But good guards do not sell tickets, nor did it fund a new stadium, and that's important too. Memorial Stadium, which had housed the Colts since 1953, was no longer suitable for an NFL franchise, and Robert Irsay was fielding offers from cities like Phoenix, LA, Memphis, Jacksonville, and Podunk, Indianapolis to welcome the Colts. While privately flirting with each of those cities, Irsay was putting out a different message publicly. "I have not any intentions of moving the goddamn team," Irsay said on January 20th of 1984. "If I did, I will tell you about it, but I'm staying here." 2 months later, on March 29th, Irsay moved the goddamn team to Indianapolis. And in what looked like a bitch move, he did it in secret. While he was shopping the team, the city of Baltimore and the state of Maryland were resorting to legal action to keep them. On March 27th, the Maryland Senate passed legislation that would allow the city of Baltimore to seize the team by the right of eminent domain, essentially meaning that the team that was privately owned would become public. You heard that right, comrade. Think the Green Bay Packers, sort of. Well, if Wisconsin stole them? Irsay was enraged by the idea, and it only forced him to speed up the moving process. Colts front office member Michael Chernoff said of the eminent domain bill that, The city of Baltimore not only threw down the gauntlet, but they put a gun to Irsay's head and cocked it and asked, "Want to see if it's loaded?" They forced him to make a decision that day. Doesn't seem like a bitch move now. Even though the bill was passed, it had yet to go through the final stages of becoming a law, so Irsay and his group arranged for 15 Mayflower moving trucks to come pick up the team. The trucks took different routes from the Colts facility to avoid police trying to delay until the eminent domain bill could be signed. And just 8 hours after the trucks arrived in Baltimore, the team was entirely gone. But even the empty locker rooms couldn't clean out the sorrow and some redemption that was yet to come. We all know what happened next. The Colts struggled for their first 15 years in Indy until they were able to make up for the Elway debacle by using their first overall pick on Peyton Manning, who delivered them a Super Bowl in 2006. And in ironic fate, all of these consequences ended up hurting the city of Cleveland more than anyone else. Baltimore was re-gifted football in 1996 in the form of the Browns. Like Baltimore, Cleveland sued to keep their team. They were only able to retain the name, colors, history, records, and archives, while the contracts of all players and personnel were turned over to the new Baltimore Ravens. Within 5 years, the Ravens were champs, riding one of the best defenses of all time to a dominant Super Bowl win over the New York Giants. Just as Baltimore had bested New York in the greatest game ever played in 1959, they had captured a championship again against the G-Men, this time wearing purple rather than blue. That, of course, was a far cry from the '82 Colts, a team that was lucky to put a 1 in the tie column. A team so bad it almost made a Hall of Fame quarterback choose another sport. So when your squad puts in a horrific effort of a season, hopefully you now remember these Colts, and that things could be much, much worse. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please do not forget to check out the sponsor Manscaped from the link below and get 20% off your order and free shipping. I'm 5 Points Vids, and you made it to my next video.